Okay. All right, we'll start with our opening prayers. We're going to do just the refuge and bodhicitta and the short mandala offering this morning. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits I create through listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha to benefit all transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits I create through listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits I create through listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon, I imagine as a Buddha land and offer it. May all transmigratory beings enjoy this pure land. We have to do the next verse. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the earth of those to be subdued exactly as they need. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Narayatayami. So welcome back for the last in our series of classes on the introduction to Buddhist psychology. In this final session, we will be focusing on one presentation of awarenesses and knowledges, which is mind and mental factors. And so hindsight being 20/20, this might have been the topic that we could have presented earlier on in the series, and then moved on to the sevenfold typology. But either way, the order is fine, and I think that everything that we learned in the previous classes, hopefully you were able to attend some of them, will directly inform our presentation today on mind and mental factors. So to begin with, as we transition from our daily activities to focusing on the Dharma. So I thought we could begin with just a short reflection, as we always do. But here thinking about the role of memory and how our memories color and inform our present experience in such a powerful way. And so when we pay attention to just how much time and effort we spend in reliving, our past experiences, and the time that we spend in cultivating our precious memories. Reliving experiences of friendship and warmth and safety and security. Gaining strength and the courage that we need to feel that somebody's always got our backs. Using that as a foundation for making it to the end of the day. Using it as a foundation for growth, for expanding our own hearts, of leaning in and in the direction of others, being able to embrace others, because we're coming from a place of strength and security. And so taking a minute to acknowledge our happiness, acknowledge our own strengths, and feeling gratitude for everyone who makes that possible. Everyone who makes it possible for us to be here, even for us to be here sharing the Dharma in this specific context. So amazing. And then acknowledging our own pain, our own suffering, our own trauma. But knowing that with the support of our spiritual teachers, with the support of our friends and family, and we'll make it through. Slowly, slowly, step by step. By understanding suffering and the causes of suffering, we can free ourselves from the chains of samsara. And so by being aware of the way in which we arrange and rearrange all of the puzzle pieces of who we were in the past, watching how we construct new versions of ourselves over and over again, and watching that process so that we can become, kinder, so that we become more gentle, more open to the world. Taking that version of me into the future, right? Using our practice to stay grounded in the present moment. Using our breath to come back home. Completely letting go of this self-cherishing tendency, this me-making process generates our identity. Turning away from this false sense of I, this enemy within us. And instead, with joyful effort, finding true happiness in cherishing others. Okay. All right, so we're going to start with the definitions. So we're on slide 30. We're going to jump right in here and talk about this idea of, again, of the mind. So cognizers, so knowers, so consciousness, right? This is what we've been talking about over the past few weeks. Mental cognizers can be broken into two categories. So we're talking about primary consciousnesses, or also translated as main minds. And as we've talked about in the previous classes, right, we're referring to the 5 sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness, okay? So the primary consciousness and then what's known as mental factors. And depending on which scholar, which tradition you are studying, then there can be either 49 or 51 mental factors. So the two primary texts, the two primary scholars who are known for their teachings on mind and mental factors would be Asanga, who wrote a text called the Compendium of Knowledge, and Vasubandhu, who wrote the Treasury of Knowledge. So in this presentation, we'll be talking about Asanga's, from Asanga's perspective, the Compendium of Knowledge. So primary consciousnesses and mental factors, we're going to explore what those subjects entail. And we'll see how understanding this topic is so helpful for understanding our own experiences in daily life. So, this is a lot. Okay, so we're going to skip down to slide 31. So there are different ways in how we can understand this topic of the relationship between minds and mental factors. So I should point out that all of the information that I'll be presenting today is covered maybe in a slightly different order or slightly different terminology in the Nalanda Master's Course file or teaching that we've been using for the past few weeks. And so if not all of the information that I present in the talk, it's not going to be captured word for word on the slides, but it doesn't really matter because you have the source information. You can always go back and read the text. And in fact, when we get into the details of like the 20 secondary afflictions, I'm not going to go through each of the 20 because it's all in the text and you can go back and read it on your own. So that is the sort of the caveat for where we're going with this presentation. So on slide 31, we've got the breakdown of these mental factors. So there are 5 omnipresent mental factors, there are 5 object ascertaining mental factors, there are 11 virtuous mental factors, 6 root afflictions, 20 secondary afflictions, and 4 variable mental factors. So we're going to go through each of these in a minute. So slide 32, again, in terms of understanding the different functions, the different ways in which the primary consciousnesses and these mental factors work. So what's the job of the primary consciousnesses, the 5 sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness? Then their job is to, kind of in a general sense, they apprehend an object, an object that's out there, okay? So they apprehend like the fundamental presence of the object, meaning, they would have some sense that there's a camera over there, that they see something that looks roughly like a really strange chair over there, these little red things, or a table, right? But they don't go any further. than kind of this, at that initial, oh, there's something there, right? They're not even identifying what it is necessarily. They're receiving information from their respective sense powers, right? So then the mental factors, are working, it's a team approach. The primary consciousness and their associated mental factors work together as a team, where each of the mental factors, right, we just said there are like 51 mental factors, right? All of them together work together to apprehend, the object, okay? Because each of the mental factors has its own specific function. It's got its own little job, okay? And it's going to apprehend a particular object or particular aspect of the object, okay? So, so look, we're going to go through the first of these, which is when we talk about how they all work together, then we have this on slide 33. So each of the 51 mental factors, like it can be identified separately, right? So they're not, they have their differences, but taken together, when they work together to apprehend an object, right? Then they work together, they come together as having the same nature. They become, the same nature. Okay, so when we say that they are, we say that they're concomitant, and that they have 5 similarities. Okay, so what are the same 5 similarities? So they are the same basis, meaning that they depend on the same cognitive faculty. Okay, the same faculty, the same observed object. So they're all, looking at the same thing, or engaging with the same thing, right? So if the object, let's say, is the table, right, then each of these mental factors and the primary consciousnesses, right, they're all looking at the table. It's not like some of them are looking at the table and some of them are looking at the ceiling, right? Everyone's working on the same object there. And they're all generated in the same aspect of the object. Again, they're focusing on the same thing. They occur at the same time, same moment in time, right? So that makes sense. And they're of the same entity or the same substance, okay? So each mental state, each state of consciousness would consist of the one primary consciousness, whether it's the eye, ear, nose, tongue, taste, right, tactile. So one primary consciousness, and then only one of each of its mental factors. And we're going to go through the mental factors in a second, so this will make a lot more sense. But just remember, this mental state consists of one of the primary consciousnesses and then one of the mental factors, which isn't to say that, like, it doesn't change, but that's the basic definition. Okay, so a question, that might arise is, okay, so we've got these mental factors and they're accompanying a primary consciousness. And so when we say that, so the question is, how do they interact? What's the relationship between them? This is the part that's harder to understand, right? Because we're saying that, on the one hand, you can identify them separately, but at the same time, we just said that there are these 5 similarities, right? They have the same basis, the same observed object, the same aspect, the same time, and the same entity. And so one of the examples that was commonly given was to think of the, and some of you may have heard this, to think of the primary consciousness as like your hand, and then with each of the fingers representing, a mental factor. And so the trick with understanding that example is that it makes it kind of seem as though, each of the mental factors is a separate entity, and that they exist, together with the hand, but it places a greater emphasis on their differences. So a different analogy that's easier to understand, the one that's been presented in His Holiness's book, His Holiness and Venerable Tipton Tridren's presentation, as well as some other sources that I came across, was they give an example of a Pali scripture, the Milinda Pupana, of a king named Milinda and the monk named Nagasena Thera. And the example says, the monk Nagasena asked if the different flavors in a cook's sauce, like a cooking gravy or a sauce, can be picked out from the others. Like, could you identify individual ingredients in a cook's sauce, right? So this is an analogy for trying to separate out the mental factors. And so you can't, right? If you think of like a really extraordinarily complex Indian curry, right? The sauces, it's very hard to get. There are probably 10 different types of spices and then the flavoring of the vegetables. You couldn't just eat it and identify just the turmeric or just the cardamom, right? It's impossible. So likewise, when we think of the way in which these mental factors are coming together at a single instant of time, you can't pick out one, distinguish one from the other. Okay? So that's something to keep in the back of your mind in case you're wondering, well, and you'll see as we go through the different mental factors, you'll see how difficult that would be. Okay? So the next way of thinking about this is identifying the 5 omnipresent mental factors. So these are the mental factors that accompany all minds, all mental states. So as we go through this list, then you can, think, hey, yes, indeed, these are the things that make sense because they're part of our everyday moment-to-moment experience, right? So on slide 34, so these are mental factors that create, our experience. Okay, so without them, if you're missing any one of these, then an act of cognition would not be possible, would not occur. All right. So we're going to go through each and talk about what function each of these perform. So the first is feeling. So feeling is understood as experience. Okay, so our feelings and our experience, one and the same. And so we experience pleasure, pain, and then neutral feelings. Right. Well, most of the time it's neutral. So we can think of feeling as being the experiencing the results of our past actions, whether they're, positive, negative, or neutral. And that leads us to react with some kind of, emotional, maybe attachment or anger, confusion, etc., right? And so we can remind ourselves that what's happening to us right now is very much a part of the karma the karmic imprints that we have created in the past, right? And so feeling can be physical or mental, and the origin is going to be karma ripening in the present moment. Okay, so that's feeling. So that's the first of the omnipresent factors. The second is discrimination, also translated as discernment. And this is the factor which distinguishes objects. It's that ability of the mind to make differences between different aspects of an object or different multiple objects, right? So it allows you to make a distinction between, I always go back to cars, a Honda from a Chevy, to a Toyota, right? And it does so by apprehending individual characteristics of an object, right? Shape, color, sound, whatever it is. So it differentiates and identifies objects. And this can be done either with the sense consciousnesses, through an act of direct perception, or through, when we're talking about discrimination, and discernment, then also, of course, it could be conceptual. Okay, so that's discrimination. So I should point out that if you're following along in Geshe Dorje Damdol's text, the wording may be slightly different. What is different from what I'm presenting, because I chose to give the presentation based on following in the what's the title of the book? Following in the Buddha's Footsteps, I think, by the Dalai Lama and Venerable Thupten Chodron. Okay, so this presentation is taken from there. So this third one is intention, also known as volition. So this is important because it's the mental factor that moves the primary mind, or primary consciousness, along with all of the other mental factors towards the object. Okay, so when you think of, so that's what it is. It's that factor, that mental factor that moves your mind in the direction of the thing that you're trying to apprehend, right? So if you're looking at the table, intention is that mental factor that draws your attention to the table. Okay, so it's a conscious and automatic motivating element that causes the mind to involve itself with and apprehend the object. And so it is actually, and the triggering word here is volition. When you hear the word volition, you think karma, right? So this is actually karma. Very interesting. So intention itself is neither, it's neutral, okay? Well, actually, no. Intention itself is not constructive, not destructive, and it's not neutral. So that's a good, important point to emphasize, actually. It's neither constructive, destructive, or neutral. And so it's flavorless in that sense. But it becomes so, right, because we're saying that it's karma. It becomes so depending on what the other mental factors drag along, right? So it's going to get its coloring depending on what the other mental factors at that particular instant of time, right, are bringing to the table. Okay, so because we were just talking about how in any moment you could have feeling, right? Feeling could be expressed as pain, pleasure, or a neutral feeling. Along with that, associated with that, you could end up with a response, which could be bring up feelings of attachment, anger, or aversion, right? So all of this is coming together, and we're talking about a moment of intention. So there's a lot going on. So intention is what's going to direct the activity of each of the other mental factors within the main mind with respect to the object that we're talking about, okay? So Geshe Kelsang Wangmo, in her teaching on Lorig, on awareness and knowledge, she points out that here, when we talk about intention, it does not mean motivation. So sometimes those words get conflated, but here, like we just said, it's it's neither constructive, destructive, or neutral. So there's no sense of motivation. Motivation, this is intention in this sense is like an automatic reflexive thing. Motivation has more of an agency, right? More of a sense of conscious choice behind it. You don't make an effort to generate an intention. The intention just happens. Okay? So it moves the mind and the mental factors toward the object, which I think is a really important and interesting way of thinking about it. It's your mind moving towards the object, just as a magnet would draw, us towards it, or draw metal things towards it. Okay, that sense of attraction. Yeah. Okay, so that's intention. That's a really important one too. And then once you've got intention, then you would also think, well, what about attention, right? The kind of comes together, I think, automatically in your mind. So what's attention then? It's what directs the primary consciousness and the associated mental factors to the object and to actually apprehend it. Okay, so intention, it's getting us like 90% of the way maybe. It's bringing us towards the object, and then attention, maybe takes it a step further, and where we're actually apprehending the object. So it focuses the object, it focuses the mind and the mental factors on the object, holds on to it, and enables us to see not just like a general object out there, but the particular characteristics that the particular object that we're looking at. Okay, and then finally, contact, right? You need contact. So this wouldn't make any sense without contact. Contact is where you're connecting the object itself. Like here we've got our table, right? So the cognitive faculty, which would be the sense faculty, right? We went through all of those. So in this case, it would be, if you're just seeing the table, then it would be the eye sense faculty. If you're touching the table, then it would be also, that tactile sense faculty. And then the primary consciousness, which again, if you're seeing it, then it's that visual sense consciousness. If you're touching it, it would be the tactile, etc. Okay. So contact is the mental factor that brings all of those three together and then acts as the basis for the experience of feeling. Feelings of pain, pleasure, or indifference. So it's the cause of feeling. So that's contact, okay? So those are the omnipresent faculty, mental factors which inform or which are present in every single moment of cognition, of awareness. So that there's a lot going on, right? Every second of the day, every millisecond, every aspect of experience is informed by feeling, discrimination, intention, attention, and contact. Really, it's really brilliant. Very, very interesting. So just like to summarize that. So all instances of mind include, right, contact, right? It brings everything together. It includes volition or intention. It includes attention and feeling. Okay, so is that all three? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So contact, volition, attention, conception, and feeling. Okay. So if we're missing any one of those, right? If we're missing contact, for example, then nothing else is none of these others are gonna be able to arise because there'll be no object that, that we're looking at, so to speak. There would be nothing to experience. Okay. So, that was slide 35, I think.
It's 34.
Oh, we're on 34. Am I off?
35 is working together.
Okay. So 35, right. Okay. So, yeah. So then we can move on to 36. And 36 is the 5 object ascertaining mental factors. So these are mental factors with specific object, a determinative or specific object. So this is where we have mental factors that specialize in identifying the individual features of an object. Okay, so if you want to get really geeky, interestingly, the Treasury of Knowledge, written by Vasubandhu, says that these accompany all mental states, whereas according to His Holiness and Venerable Troops and Children in their book, they point out that in the compendium of knowledge, Asanga's compendium of knowledge, that these mental factors, these object ascertaining mental factors, only accompany virtuous mental states. They are not themselves virtuous, but become so because of being associated with a virtuous mental state. So I actually didn't see that in any of the other texts per se. But anyway, I just thought I would throw it out there. So what are they? They are aspiration, appreciation, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So just to give a brief definition for each of these. So aspiration is when the mental factor that takes a strong interest in the intended object, right? And is the basis for giving rise to joyous effort. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense if you go with the assumption that these are particularly related to virtuous mental states, then aspiration, taking an interest in something that is going to either a virtuous object, like a holy text or statue of the Buddha, whatever it is, right? A virtuous state object. It would make sense that would be a source for joyous effort. The second is appreciation, also translated as belief. It's that which stabilizes the apprehension of something that you previously ascertained, and you hold it such that you cannot be distracted, or that you can't be, your conviction, can't be destroyed by another like competing view or competing presentation. So that's appreciation or belief. It's a very stable, when you're stabilizing, it's a mental factor that stabilizes something that you've previously apprehended. Okay, so aspiration, appreciation, mindfulness. Mindfulness is the mental factor that repeatedly is similar to appreciation. You're recollecting something that you've previously generated some familiarity with, some acquaintance with, and the function is not to forget it. Okay, so you're going to be able to hold on to that. It does not allow the mind to be distracted away from the object, and so it's the basis for concentration. And then concentration or single-pointedness allows the mind to dwell single-pointedly for a sustained period of time on a single object. So then the final one is wisdom, and wisdom is the ability to discriminate in a precise way, using reasoning analysis, the qualities, the faults, the characteristics of an object that's being held by mindfulness. So you're holding the object, maybe you're analyzing the impermanence of whatever it might be, the impermanence of the person, right? Or the selfness of a person. So that's the topic that you're analyzing, and you're holding that topic using mindfulness, right? There are two kinds of wisdom. There's an inborn natural activity of the mind that comes as a result of karma. That's one form of wisdom, that innate wisdom. And the second would be the acquired wisdom, which is something that we can develop and improve on through our learning or studying, through our reflection and meditation, right? The cultivation of wisdom requires those three efforts. Okay. And so when we think of the qualities that we seek to grow within our own mental continuum, right? There's always room for improvement. And so these virtuous mental factors are the ones that we should be focusing on, right? And so, the benefit of focusing on these areas is that it enables us to overcome our root afflictions, which we'll talk about in a second. And by doing so, we can eliminate all of the temporary stains that bind us to samsara. So, okay, so those were, did I just misspeak? Those were the 5 object ascertaining mental factors, which you can think of as either, just as a recap, either as accompanying all mental states or as just accompanying the mental states. So then we can take a closer look at the 11 virtuous mental factors themselves. So the 11 virtuous mental factors on slide 37. So the first of these would be faith, also translated as confidence or trust. So this is specifically confidence in the Dharma, okay? Confidence where, in the context of the Dharma. So it could be our faith in the path, or faith in karma, or faith in any aspect of the Buddha's teachings, right? The 3 jewels. And it gives rise to a joyous state of mind. And so it would be the basis for virtuous aspiration, right? So that's faith. And then we have integrity, consideration for others, non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-harmfulness. And I grouped those all together. I created these little groupings. So I thought that those all kind of fit together in terms of mental factors that would help us grow, related, in terms of the relationship between ourselves and others, okay? So integrity is also translated as shame. And so it's the mental factor that helps us avoid negativity for reasons of personal consciousness and out of self-respect. Okay, so it's that internal, voice that says, hey, I shouldn't do that. I'm going to refrain from harming others. Right? It's a basis for our own personal self-respect. Right? Okay. I wouldn't do that because I would feel terrible afterwards. Right? It's that little inner voice. And then this closely related to that would be consideration for others. So it's where we care about the effect of our actions on others, and so we avoid negativity because we don't want to, cause harm. So it's the basis for ethical conduct, right? Prevents others from losing faith in us, right? Because if we're constantly criticizing and getting in people's ways, et cetera, then they're not going to trust us as friends or as coworkers or in any way, right? And so instead, by practicing ethical conduct, but being careful in our relationship with others in a good way, then we can cause joy in others' lives. So that's consideration for others. Non-attachment is the direct attachment, or the direct antidote to attachment. And so it's that giving away, letting go of attachment to ourselves, to our belongings, etc. It's non-attachment. And then the last 2 here in this list, non-hatred, also translated as non-aversion. This was an interesting one. So non-hatred is the direct opposite. It's the direct opposite of animosity, right? So non-hatred, non-aversion, this is the direct opposite of animosity, which is love and compassion. So direct opposite of animosity or You can also think of it as being the antidote to anger and hatred, right? So love and compassion are the antidote to anger and hatred. So it's the basis for the prevention of hostility, right? So a mental factor of non-hatred prevents hostility from arising. It increases the opposite, which is love and compassion, benevolence, forgiveness, all those good things, right? This is all associated with cultivating the mental factor of non-hatred. And then in the another way of thinking about it is it's a mental factor which is free of animosity to three objects: the perpetrator or the being who is causing you harm, right? And then the suffering experience itself, and then the direct cause of the suffering, right? So having a mental factor of non-hatred would enable us to not generate a feeling of hostility towards, a person who's harming us, to the experience of suffering, or to the cause of the suffering, right? So whether it's harsh words or, you're being beaten with a stick, whatever it might be, right? So that's one way of, I shouldn't say one way. This is a good presentation for understanding non-hatred in a slightly more detailed way. And then the last in this category is non-harmfulness, which is compassion. So it's that wish for all beings to be free from suffering. So it's similar to non-hatred, right? We had non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-harmfulness. Okay, where non-hatred is the opposite of animosity, it's love and compassion. We talked about the nuances of that definition. And then this final one is specifically is non-harmfulness, is compassion. It's that wish for all beings to be free from suffering. Okay, so each of these mental factors, this grouping is the mental factors that improves our relationships with ourselves and others. These are all necessary components. So I'll get through the last, and then I'll ask you if you have any questions. The last grouping is non-confusion, joyous effort, pliancy, conscientiousness, and equanimity. These seem to me to be related to developing and guarding the mind, mental factors that would serve that function. So non-confusion is the opposite of confusion. It's the antidote for confusion and ignorance. We have an inborn disposition, an inborn nature of non-confusion, but we need to cultivate it, to strengthen it through our study, reflection, and meditation. And non-confusion accompanies the firm wisdom, the wisdom that thoroughly analyzes the nature and specific characteristics of an object. So that would be non-confusion. And then joyous, the last four are easy to understand. So joyous effort is the mental factor which counteracts laziness and engages in virtue. It enables us to generate the constructive or virtuous qualities that we haven't generated in the past, right? And to strengthen and further any virtues that we've already cultivated. Okay, so that's joyous effort. And then pliancy is that quality of the mind that enables it to dispel any mental or physical, rigidity, right? So it's the opposite of having a mind that's, very, very inflexible, right? So when you talk about meditation practice, right, or cultivating shamatha, you often learn about this special quality that arises from sustained meditation practice as being one of mental pliancy. Right? Your mind becomes very subtle, very loose, very open, and at the same time, very single-pointed. So then conscientiousness is the mental factor which enables us to guard the mind against the afflictions, right? So it's like mental vigilance related to that. And so it would be the route for traversing all of the grounds and paths on the way to enlightenment. Got to have that conscientiousness. And then finally, we've got equanimity, which prevents restlessness and laxity without having to exert great effort to prevent them. So it's a sense of, again, of ease, of openness, of stability that enables the mind to remain concentrated on the object for as long as, you need to. Okay, so in this specific context, that's what equanimity means. Right? Okay, so I guess, so slide 38 should show the grouping with the faith. I shouldn't be so lazy, I should look. I have my slides here. Where did it go? Is that what's on 38? Okay, so that's 38. Are there any questions so far before we go into the 6 root afflictions? I'm going to try to finish this presentation so we have some time for questions at the end, but I'm not sure. That might not happen. Any questions so far in terms of the mind and mental factors that we've covered? Does that seem pretty clear?
Hey, we have a question over here.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Venerable. With the 11 things that you just talked about, there as 11 virtuous mental factors. So when they become an action of your body, speech, or mind, like an action for non-hatred would be, I'm not going to hit that my dog or something, or I'm not going to step on that ant. You know what I mean? Is it still considered a mental factor when it becomes an action of either your body, speech, or mind?
Yeah. Oh, so are you thinking that when you would have the virtuous mental factor and then initially, and then does that carry over when you're actually refraining from harming?
Right, like if you're actually physically refraining from harming, or I'm doing a faith thing, I'm making an offering physically on the altar. Is that still the mental factor, or is it called something else?
Yeah, because every moment of that mental state would be informed by that virtuous mental factor, along with the omnipresent mental factors and the primary consciousness. So it would exist at that particular time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's a good question. Anything else? So let's move on to the 6 root afflictions, and that'll get us all riled up. Slide 39, please. So the 6 root afflictions, I'm sure many of you have heard these before. These are our old friends. We got attachment, anger, arrogance, ignorance, deluded doubt, and afflictive views. So we'll just go through these quickly. Just remembering, that when we talk about these root afflictions, keeping in mind that, we are not our anger, right? We're not, defined by our desires. We can control these root afflictions. We definitely can overcome these enemies, right? And in fact, we have to attain enlightenment. This is all about working with these negative emotions. That's what our path involves. So the 6 root afflictions, they're the primary cause of cyclic existence, and the causes of the secondary afflictions, which we'll talk about in a minute. So attachment arises based on projecting or exaggerating the attractiveness of objects within cyclic existence. And then, it's that clinging to them, hoping that they will never be taken from us, hoping that they'll always be, by our side. Okay? That's attachment. And then anger arises based on projecting or exaggerating the unattractiveness of an object. And then it disturbs our mind, it agitates our mind. So the desire to cause harm, arises, right? So you can see how anger and attachment are so closely, related, right? Because if you're very attached to something, whether it's, like it's your bag, right? So I'm really attached to my bag. It's a souvenir from a teaching I went to in India, yada, yada, right? So I'm attached to my bag, and if something happens to my bag, if somebody takes it away, then anger would arise. Very, very strong anger would arise, right? So both of these are disturbed, distracted, unsettled states of mind, yeah? And then, so actually I should point that out. So anger arises in reference to the person who steals my bag, right? The person. It refers to the suffering itself, right? That feeling itself. And then the cause of the harm, which was the theft, right? So that's very closely related to to what we were talking about just a second ago when we were talking about the mental factor of non-hatred, right? So you can see that parallel. Okay, and then, so that was anger, and then arrogance, or that pride, is based on the view of a self, right? That personal identity that apprehends. In this case, we're talking specifically about that inherently existent self, yeah? An inherently existing self or me, mine. Actually should just be I or mine. Arrogance, well, it says I or mine. I would have said I. Okay, so that's arrogance. That big, unchanging, puffed up, inherently existent I. Okay. Then ignorance is the state of unknowing caused by a mind being unclear about the nature of things. Again, in this context, talking about the Dharma, so the Four Noble Truths, the law of cause and effect, etc. That's ignorance. Deluded doubt, we've talked about in the previous class, that type of deluded misunderstanding or wavering, not knowing for sure whether or not something is true or not true. It's deluded doubt. And then finally, afflictive views. There's a whole boatload of these. And I don't think we're going to go through all of them because they're in Geshe Dorje Damdol's, the Nalanda Master Course presentation. So I'll just read them. Afflictive intelligence, the view of a personal identity, the view of extremes, the view of holding wrong views as supreme, the view of rules and practices, and wrong views. Okay, so what it comes down to is an inaccurate understanding of reality based on incorrect or mistaken views of the way things exist. Okay. Do you have any questions about those? Like, I've got the definitions, but I don't think I'm going to read through all of them.
Anila,
Uh-huh.
arrogance is similar to pride.
Yeah, it's that puffed up sense of, a concrete I ruling the universe. All right, so the 20 secondary afflictions. Let's see, what have we got here? We've got a long list. But the good thing is that they are pretty much easy to understand. Like, I'm going to point out a couple that kind of stand out as having a particularly dharma meaning, something otherwise, they can be understood from a common sense, conventional definition kind of way. So I'm not going to read through the definitions because they're all in the Nalanda course. So what I thought I would do instead, if you look on slides 40 and 41, please, what I did was I had too much time on my hands, so I tried to do a crosswalk between at least the 11 virtuous mental factors and how those overcome, some of the secondary afflictions. It doesn't cover yape. Obviously, I've got 11 on the left and more than 20 secondaries, so it's not perfect, but it's one way of looking at these mental factors. So the virtuous mental factor on the left overcomes the secondary affliction on the right. So we've got faith, right, overcomes faithlessness. We've got integrity overcoming shamelessness. We've got consideration for others, overcoming non-embarrassment, right? That's where you do something and you really don't care what anybody thinks. You're going to do it anyway. And then non-attachment being as a antidote for miserliness, miserliness being that sense of, no, I'm not going to give it away. It's mine. I don't have enough. I never have enough, right? I couldn't possibly share because I never have enough. Miserliness. And then I think, I should also point out that, I don't think that particularly when we get to like the secondary afflictions, it's not necessarily an exhaustive list, right? Because you can start thinking about many other afflictions that could have made the list, but they're not. So, I'm not making that up. I've heard other teachers say that too. So in the case of like, so for non-attachment, that's one of the virtuous mental factors. What about generosity? Generosity of spirit. What about patience? I think there are other things that could be wrapped. Forgiveness. Where's forgiveness? It's not on the list, right? But anyway. So non-attachment, I think, could include some of these other feelings or thoughts. Antidote for miserliness. And then we've got, moving on, non-hatred being the antidote. It overcomes belligerence. Belligerence is hatred. Non-harmfulness is the antidote for harmfulness. Okay. And then our next category was developing and guarding the mind. And so we've got non-confusion, overcoming non-introspection. We've got joyous effort, overcoming laziness. Laziness has a very specific definition, so I wanted to spend a little time on that. So just straight out of Geshe Dorje Damdul's presentation, it's a mental factor which does not find joy in virtue or feels, he says, low meaning like, depressed or, well, they're not, like you're not into it when you're engaging in virtue, right? Maybe you just do it because everybody else is doing it, or whatever. So due to temporary happiness and pleasure, then, even when you're engaging in some kind of virtuous act, you're just not doing it with joy, right? You're feeling that kind of resistance that laziness entails, okay? So laziness is closer to ignorance in nature, and it undermines the power of enthusiasm. It's the basis for degenerating the virtues that you've already so carefully accumulated, as well as it can destroy, the basis for acquiring new virtues. So laziness is very, very pernicious, right? It's something that we really, really, really have to guard our minds against, because it can sneak in so sneakily, can be very sneaky, right? It's hard to detect sometimes. So there's three kinds. So laziness in terms of being attached to trivial purposes, like, you think, oh, I'd rather go shopping. Oh, I've got this long shopping list. Oh, I got to do the laundry. I got to clean the house. I got to do some cooking, whatever it is, right? So instead of sitting down and doing your Dharma practice, doing your prayers, reading your sadhanas, doing some kind of meditation, or just going out and helping somebody, right? Instead, you're just like, oh, I could do some mindless little thing instead. That is a form of laziness. So closely related to that is the laziness of procrastination. So in terms of time, it's thinking, oh, well, I don't have to do it, I don't have to do my prayers right now in the first thing in the morning when my mind is fresh. Instead, I'll do it 2 hours from now, and 4 hours from now. Before you know it, it's 10 o'clock at night and you still haven't done your prayers. So that would be procrastination. And then finally would be the laziness of undermining one's own potential, meaning, oh, I could never do that. A little person, ordinary person like me, not going to happen, right? That's a form of laziness, actually. Saying, I'm not going to go out and commit to doing, a retreat. Right? I just couldn't do that. Yeah. So that's actually a form of laziness. Can anybody relate to that? Am I the only lazy person around?
Certainly not.
Definitely not.
It's my specialty. Okay, so then the last three, pliancy is the mental factor that overcomes dullness or lethargy, particularly in the context, I guess, of meditation. Conscientiousness is the ability to watch the mind, be on top of it. That helps overcome unconscientiousness, its opposite. And then finally, we have equanimity, which is the antidote to having a distracted mind, wanders all over the place. So that discursive mind. And so then on slide 42, please, I tried to just do a little bit of kind of the same thing, but associating the 6 root afflictions on the 20 secondary afflictions. So for attachment is related to like envy, to miserliness. I was going to say frustration. What happened to frustration? I think, if you can't have something that you really, really want, then that's related to attachment, right? Hatred would include belligerence, right? Spite, harmfulness. And I was going to sneak in revenge, right? I think revenge is kind of related to that. If you guys think of other ones, feel free to shout them out. Then for arrogance, I put vanity or haughtiness. And then the ones that I didn't really have any correlations for were ignorance, deluded doubt, and afflictive views. Although maybe faith is in there somewhere. Well, why did I put faith over there? Oh, no, let's take faith out. Any mental factors or any mental secondary afflictions that come to mind that, you think could be here? Be interesting to think about. Think it's a pretty good list? Good with it? Okay. So I was wondering, what about fear? Where's fear? Fear, anxiety, depression. I don't see those on the list either. And so I was thinking that, that attachment to the false sense of a self, that false sense of me, by extension, my possessions, mine, that attachment is what gives rise to fear, right? It gives rise to anxiety. When things don't go our way, when somebody hurts us, then we feel, scared. We can feel scared. And then that leads to anger, it leads to negative actions that we carry out as a result of, that threat. Yeah. And that's what results in negative karma. And that negative karma then, can ripen at any time, right? Can come back and inform our feelings, our experience. Yeah. So, and so I think that, oftentimes it's difficult to live with, our painful experiences. It's difficult to acknowledge painful feelings. We're haunted by memories. We can be afraid or anxious about what's to come. We can be afraid of our own personal weaknesses, frustrated by our inability to achieve our goals, right? We can feel inferior to others or unable to keep up with others as we age. So all of that, right? All of that. And so we, oftentimes, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, we make an effort to hide ourselves, to hide behind a presentation of ourselves, to hide our identity. Yeah. And so what I'm saying is that we need to be very careful to identify that tendency, and to understand, to the extent to which our ignorance, deluded doubt, afflictive views, right? The extent to which these 6 root afflictions and this host of secondary afflictions, all of that negativity, all of that is related to the ripening of karma. Yeah. And yet we can, and we will, and we must and should do away of all of that negative karma, through purification, through conscientiousness, through cultivating in a very direct and deliberate way all of the 11 virtuous mental factors that we just talked about. Right? And so we can eradicate these roots of samsara, miserliness, belligerence, non-introspection. We can choose to cultivate the antidotes, which are non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-delusion. Damn. 11:18. That's disappointing. Okay, 4 variable mental factors, slide 43. These are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous, but become so in dependence on our motivation and the other mental factors that are present. We've got sleep, my personal favorite. Sleep, regret, investigation, and analysis. So in the interest of saving time, I'm not going to read the definitions, but you can take a look at the Nalanda course. They're very straightforward. There's nothing. They can be virtuous or non-virtuous or neutral depending on the underlying intention or motivation. Okay. Then I had some slides. I called it extra credit. This was like the really nerdy stuff. And it's absolutely fascinating. And I'm really bummed that we're not going to have time to talk about this. So I apologize. But, maybe some other time we can go through this if anybody's interested. So I think what we'll do is, do you have any questions? We have a little bit of time.
Anila?
Uh-huh.
Might it be possible to do like the elevator speech? Just a really kind of brief synopsis of your hard work, your research?
For the whole course? Or
No,
just
the part that you don't have time for.
the extra credit. The extra credit. What was the extra credit? It was just going through that last way of defining awarenesses and knowledges. Because you could do it in terms of division into two, which would kind of summarize everything that we've talked about. So it was like conceptual versus, do I have it on the slide? Slide 44. Yeah, it was conceptual and non-conceptual, prime cognizers and subsequent cognizers. So when you think of it in terms of a sequence of actions, moments of consciousness in terms of time, mistaken and non-mistaken, we talked about that, and the mental and sense consciousnesses. So that was a big one. And then the last one was when you look at conceptual and non-conceptual consciousnesses, we talked about the definition of a conceptual consciousness as being the type of knower that gets at its object by mixing, or through that interaction of a sound generality and a meaning generality. So that idea of using a linguistic or naming convention, a language. How does language and get associated with meaning when you're looking at any object? So how does that process arise, and what does that mean in terms of our relation to how we create reality? So I can't.
That is crazy interesting.
We'll do it some other time.
Okay.
Were there any other questions about from previous classes or now? Because
Tendrol, I'd love if you could teach another class on it. You're always so clear and insightful, and these like big concepts, you put them in this very beautiful like PowerPoint presentations, and I don't know, I always grasp it really
The
easily.
PowerPoint.
So maybe you can
Thank
teach
you.
another one on this.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad this was of some use. And yeah.
I mean, that's a topic that's so spoken of now, this whole idea of manifesting and creating reality, and especially now when things are so seemingly so turbulent.
I was thinking of it in terms of AI, just at a very
Oh,
personal level,
right.
helping us question what are we really looking at? Is that true or is it just AI?
Right. Thanks, Anila.
Thank you. Um, so in terms of the dedication to merit, so the very last slide is an image.
The second one. Oh, you said dedication. I was about to go to like the prayers.
Oh, sorry.
So, okay, give me a second.
I'm sorry. So some of you may have followed this group of monks.
Yeah.
It was called Walk for Peace, and it's a group of about 20 monks from Vietnam and Thailand and Taiwan, many different Southeast Asian countries who came together, and they walked from Fort Worth, Texas, 2,300 miles to Washington, D.C. over the course of several months. They arrived sometime it was like last week or something, very recently. And so they met with, hundreds, if not thousands of people along their journey. And the message that they were sharing was one of peace, and the monk who was the leader was from Vietnam. He's a young man in his 40s. And he was asked by a reporter, what kept you going, through the rain and the snow. And they slept in tents along the highway. And he said that what really gave him the strength to continue this journey was the tears and the stories of suffering that he heard from, the people who came out to greet the monks. And his ability to share with them this message of peace, of just, not in any Buddhist sense, but of coming back to the breath, of being mindful, of understanding that the peace has to come from within, right? That it's not going to be something that we find outside. Right? That was the main message that he shared with everyone along the 2,300 miles. And so may you be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May you be filled with peace and everlasting joy. And even if we can't go and walk 2,300 miles, then that's okay, because the change comes from within. It's the inner work, that inner cultivation of peace, of not depending on outside sources, external sources to give us joy, but instead to nurture that loving kindness and peace that's with us all the time, right? I mean, that's what I think we've been trying to learn over the course of, these 7 weeks together or whatever it was, right? That we have everything that we need, right here, right now. So let's do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Anila.
Okay, back to the final prayers. Here we go. Yes. Oh, I forgot one. I can do this. Prayers. The closing prayers. What are we doing for closing prayers? Sorry, I'm scrolling here. Dedication prayers. We are on 15, yes. Gewa di nyur dang lama songge drum gyurne drowa chi kyang malum de salagun pashu. Due to this virtue, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. May the precious supreme bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Okay, it's a race. Who can find Khensa Rinpoche's first? It's in here somewhere.
From the Long Life one.
Yeah. I beat you.
I know you did. Let's see.
It's page. You did it?
Go ahead.
Page 111. So that your holy deeds may bless the nature of fortunate disciples, and that the Lord of 10 powers teaching and realization spread. You shine the lamp of logic for intelligent minds, spiritual friend who shows the way, to you we pray. Okay. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you, Anila.
Thank you, Ayla. Thank you, Chappelle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chappelle.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chappelle.